expect when we ran these numbers that it shows that almost 90% of the people remaining in extreme poverty will be in sub-Saharan Africa by 2050. If we zoom in even more and take it at the country level, we can see that there's quite variability in the progress here. We see that a few countries represent a lot of what remains, about a dozen here. In fact, if you just take the two countries with the most people, which would be the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria, that alone will be 40% of the entire world's population in extreme poverty. And if we zoom even further in and look at a map of Nigeria and say, okay, where inside Nigeria will we have this? This is based on 2013 data. We can see that it's not spread evenly. As you move towards the north, there's far more poverty than in the south. And so this gap that you're seeing there grows quite a bit over time. And so what this means is that this poverty is going to be a feature of life in a few places. And these are places where there are the fewest opportunities. Often, some of these places, there's violence, a lack of stability. These are places where climate change will make these subsistence farmers' lives more difficult. Also, these are often places where the governance is not providing the primary health care or education, even at a basic level. And every one of these places are exactly where we're experiencing rapid population growth. The geography of births in the world is changing, and this is something that's really fascinating. Over the rest of the century, the number of babies born stays about the same. We've really reached peak baby. But if we look at this chart, we can see that the places that they're born are changing. So we've split it into a blue line, which is babies born in sub-Saharan Africa every year, and the white line, which is the entire rest of the world. And you can see you go from today, where it's only 37 million of those births, up to where by the end of the century, it's almost getting up to the point where half of the babies on the planet are born, not just in sub-Saharan Africa, but overwhelmingly in the poorest parts of sub-Saharan Africa. So the 10 countries projected to be the poorest in the world in 2050 currently are only 10% of the world's births. By 2050, they're 20%, and by 2100, using these UNFPA numbers, it could get up to 40%. So in short, babies are going to be born in what are currently the toughest circumstances in the most challenging places in the world. They'll be born in situations where they'll at least start out spending all their time as a family, as an individual, just seeking out the food that they need and not have as much time to invest in their education, invest in building assets. So we really need to address this. We need to double down on key investments in these very tough places. The first two waves are also instructive in terms of what these investments should look like. Let's start with the investments in the people, primarily in their health and education, which economists, including now the World Bank, is emphasizing this human capital. China set a great example here. In 1990, 1 in 3 Chinese children were chronically malnourished, which means that not only physically but also mentally, they never fully developed. They did not achieve their potential. And the typical Chinese youth never got into high school. Well, since then, China has solved that malnutrition problem. And in education now, almost all students not only graduate from high school, a very high percentage, almost half, attend college. And so, you know, you just look at those cities in China and you see, wow, something miraculous came out of those human capital investments. And so to create this third wave of poverty reduction, sub-Saharan Africa's young need the same level of investment in their human capital. Of course, the size of that investment is going to be very large because of this population growth, the doubling in their youth population by 2050. And so human capital and our looking at that has never been more important. In sub-Saharan Africa, for the youthful generation, we need to get a lot of resources there and help those countries build these systems. Our partner, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, did these poverty projections on the continent, considering a couple of scenarios where the key thing we varied was the investment level in human capital. And so the status quo shows that the absolute number of people in extreme poverty will go up by about 50 million by 2050. That's disappointing. Even more sobering, though, is if we look at what some donors have talked about doing in terms of disengaging, if we look at governments not continuing to improve, there you get a very dire situation where the number almost doubles, gets up to 672 million. But we also took a scenario, the one we believe in, the one we all want to rally around, where we increase that human capital investment, where we improve those health systems and those primary and secondary schools. And there, we're able to drive that extreme poverty down by over 90 million from where we stand today. So the gap between the bad scenario and the good scenario is over a factor of 2, almost 400 million people. So that's really what's at stake. I really believe it's possible to do the best case scenario. In fact, with the right innovation, which is the most powerful force in the world, we might be able to do even better than that. A great example of this was what a discussion like this would have been about India back in the 1960s. The experts were very, very pessimistic. They looked at the population growth, they looked at the agricultural sector, and they projected mass famine because of sort of a Malthusian outstripping of the population to the food production. The book, The Population Bomb, was a best-selling book. Everybody was talking about that. Very, very dire. But the thing they missed was the innovations known collectively as the Green Revolution. Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, Norman Borlaug, a lot of heroes in that story. And the end result was that India, in the 1960s, the yield for wheat, which was very, very meager, was changed by modern technology and techniques. And now we're at almost 4 times the productivity that is output for a certain amount of land. That kind of innovation, in fact, that's another innovation we need to bring to Africa, but innovation can appear in many, many different sectors. And so we need a phenomenon like that to actually beat these predictions. You'll learn in a few minutes about some great innovations. Soil maps and how great they are, how we can pick the right fertilizer there. You'll learn about digital technology to help us understand what's going on with malnutrition and help solve that. You'll learn about education and how by getting reading resources out there to kids, their natural curiosity will let them help develop the key skills. And so it's investing in this innovation and backing young innovators across sub-Saharan Africa that we can get a very positive scenario. The world we want, a world in which every person can dream of a better future and make it come true, is a world without extreme poverty. Thank you.
Wow, wow. Please come. Thank you, Bill. That was fascinating. Now, that is the power of data and the power of analytics, people. You see, we need to drive our policies and innovations with data to ensure that this third wave of poverty reduction is sustainable and leaves our planet more resilient. I left Sierra Leone as a teenager to pursue my education. 14 years later, with a PhD in biomechatronics and a young family, I moved back home at the call of my president, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio, to be part of something audacious, the creation of Sierra Leone's Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Now, Sierra Leone is known for a complicated set of socio-political challenges. It's a post-Civil War and post-Ebola country of rapid population growth. Now, this complexity is why our government has opted to make Sierra Leone a blueprint for global development through innovation, with a focus on education, human capital development, effective and efficient governance, accountability and transparency, national environmental resilience, economic diversification, and investments in science, technology, and innovation as key drivers for delivery. Now, to discuss the commitments our government is making and the impact we're striving for, and to have a conversation with Bill about how the ideas he expressed can work on the ground, I have the honor to welcome to the stage the President of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio.